All right, guys, we have a treat today. I have Lane Kawaoka, and he is a savvy investor, and I can't wait to bring you his advice. He has gone from no properties to now he's a very savvy investor. But we're going to go back to the beginning, and if you have one property or you're about to do your first one or you have several, Lane's got some great advice here, and he's going to tell you about his community, and I can't wait for you to meet him. Lane, thank you for coming. Thanks for
Yeah,
being
thanks for
here today.
having me.
So tell us about your brief history, just so that everybody can know who you are, and we'll start there.
Yeah, previous life, I used to be an engineer, was taught to go to school, study hard, and invest in the 401k. And then part of that is buy a house to live in. But in 2007, I graduated college, saved up 80 grand to buy a house to live up in Seattle for 350 grand. And then I was traveling all over for work back then because I was a construction supervisor, construction engineer, and I was never home. So I was just like, I'm just gonna rent this property out and just live off of the company dime in hotels. And that was 2009 when I bought that first rental property, and that was, the start of all this madness. Since then, acquired over $2 billion of real estate. But the hardest one is that first rental property. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have local mentors? Like, who taught you? Like, how did you even think, oh, I'm going to go buy a property? Like, how did you first have that idea?
I didn't have any mentors. I didn't listen to any podcasts in the beginning. All I knew is like, I used to rent an apartment in college, right? So I called the landlord up and asked her, "Hey, you manage us, crazy college kids back then. Can you do the same thing for me?" And I didn't know there was all this infrastructure in place for all these property managers. You pay them 10% and like half for the full first months, but I
Hmm.
didn't know anybody in the industry. Like, none of my parents were accredited investors. I didn't have any rich uncles. Nobody had rental properties in my family. So I kind of put a lot of trust in that one relationship there.
Yeah, that's all you need sometimes, just the right one. So, on your first property, did you buy it as a primary and like live there and then depart it later and rent it out? Or how did you acquire it? Or did you put a larger down payment? How did you do it?
Yeah, I did the 20% down payment, owner occupied, and it was a class A rental property. So it's a pretty nice property. Typically, that's not what we tell people to go find today. Typically more of a B class, it hits better numbers. I think that first one rented for 2,200 a month and the purchase price was 350. So the
Okay.
rent to value ratio was way under 1%. And again, this was in Seattle, Washington. So blue
Yeah.
state. And if you were to buy that property today, it might be closer to $1 million today. And the numbers wouldn't work for sure.
So, for somebody watching and they're not sure what you mean by A class and B class, can you just briefly explain that when you're looking
Yeah.
at
So,
rentals?
same thing. Like we buy apartments, but the properties are kind of on a B, and C, and war zone type of scale. And you can grade the location which in the neighborhood and the vintage or the property type. So the property type is easier. Generally speaking, properties that are 20 years or younger are, class A properties.
Hmm.
Class Bs are your 1980s, 1970s, 1990s build, a few
Hmm.
decades old. Your class C is you're getting into your 1960s, 1950s types of property. So,
Okay.
properties, yeah, you can renovate it. And, we buy apartments today, we put lipstick on a pig or, people flip houses, they kind of renovate it up. But essentially these assets are decaying, right? Like investment properties, you don't want to own them for more than 50, certainly 100 years. So
Hmm.
that's on like the property vintage side. And then the neighborhood, to me, the neighborhood's more important. And I kind of use the rule of like my daughter, like class A probably has no problem hanging out there at nighttime, jogging around. Class B, I don't really want her out at nighttime around there, but perfectly
Right.
safe during the daytime. Class C, unless she's going to get some cool tacos or some cool food nearby, I want to get in, get out of the car, get the hell out of there, right? But
Yeah.
and
Those
then
are
of
the
course there's
run
war
down.
zone properties or war zone areas too. That's more the D class F. You never want to buy properties in those areas, but that's kind of essentially more crudely grading the neighborhood, which is a lot more subjective.
So you now have a great platform, thewealthelevator.com. So in there, because you're now, fast forward, so many couple decades forward from your first property or a decade and a half. Do you suggest to people to just buy and hold as their first properties? A lot of people are like, oh, I want to buy and flip. I'm going to flip a house and make all this money. Do you advise against that? Or like for someone that's doing their first property in investment, do you suggest the buy and hold and rent it out, or are you more of on the let's do a flip?
To me, it depends on kind of what you have to work with, like what your net worth is and what your income is. And I kind of outlined this out in the Wealth Elevator book, right? There's different floors of the Wealth Elevator. When I first started, and this is my own experience, I had a good engineering job, I had a good pay. I was a little bit short on time, but it's not like I couldn't flip houses, right? I mean, I did construction as my day
Mhm.
job, but when I was in that facet or the first floor of the Wealth Elevator, it made more sense for me to leverage my day job was my highest and best use, where my highest the hourly rate was, than to mess around flipping houses. In
Yeah.
reality, flipping houses is a active job. And you see this in the local real estate club, right? A lot of those guys don't have very much money. They don't have very good paying jobs. So they have to flip houses and take on a lot of risk. And then on the other side of the equation, for accredited investors, it may not make sense to buy little dinky little rental properties. And that was kind of where I got to in 2015 when I had 11 of these little rental properties. But don't get me wrong, right? Like if you're a non-accredited investor under $1 million net worth, and especially if you're new to the game, I think a buy and hold rental property is a great way to at least get started, get one. And that's kind of what I did from 2009 to 2015, right? As I was starting to
Okay.
acquire 11 rental properties.
Well, and back then, 2009, I mean, that was right on the heels of the mortgage meltdown. I remember that clearly. So you were probably getting properties at a discount, obviously, or under value when we were kind of in a dip in the market. But now, fast forward, we're in 2026, depending on the market that you're in, right? Like I'm in Houston, Texas, and we're just now seeing some values come down. So a lot of investors are like, man, I cannot make sense of this rent versus, the values have inflated almost all over the country, right? And so it's harder to find the deals. Now, foreclosures, there are some that are, of course, in any kind of market, but like, for identifying property, what do you just if you could bullet point just the Cliff Notes version of what you suggest people look for, like as long as you cover the PITI or how much over, do you know what I mean? Like how do you suggest that they identify if it's a good deal or not? I know there's a lot that goes into it, but if you
Yeah,
had
I
to
mean, when
summarize.
I was buying properties, a lot of these little turnkey rentals back in 2012 to 2015, I was buying in pretty decent Class B areas I had five in Atlanta, four in Birmingham, one in Indianapolis, and another in Pennsylvania. And I think you probably could have done that strategy, which I call the buy, hope, and pray strategy. You're 20% down
Yeah,
and you don't do anything to the property and you look like a genius, right? Because you're cash flowing a
yeah,
few $100.
the
That stuff
first
went
year.
away. That went away like in 2018. And it
Mhm.
certainly went away in 2021, 2022 after the pandemic, right? Because things went up an even higher mark. Again, going back to the buy, hope, and pray strategy, like you no longer can just buy something, which is super unfortunate, especially for people getting started. You have to do value add. So now you go back to like, all right, that means you either have to like take a lot of risks and compete with a lot more desperate people and maybe even a lot more financially or business savvy people who are flipping houses, or you have to go on the other side, which is becoming a passive investor in a deal that does value add. And that's the key. You no longer can buy, hope, and pray and cash flow your way there. The cash flow is gone. Like you mentioned Houston.
Yeah.
I bought a 300 unit in 2020 and the taxes were 150,000. Today it's like 450. And
Mhm.
your insurance is doubled and
Yeah,
don't get me started with debt service, right?
it's
Like
nuts.
cash
Yeah.
flow is gone. You can no longer just, sit on it by hope and pray. You have to be able to buy something where typically you put, 10 to 20 grand into every unit and that allows you to bump the rents up a tad. Part of this is like some people argue, well, prices in commercial real estate have come down 30% off the peaks. I don't know about residential real estate. I'm not in residential real estate anymore, but certainly in commercial real estate, especially in Houston, things have come down
Mhm.
drastically off the peaks of 2022 to 2024. But you can't count on market appreciation. Like the idea is you have to go in knowing that you're going to be somewhat cash flow neutral, but being able to value add to force appreciate the value,
Yeah.
right? As opposed to just hoping that the price goes up. So to me, it's kind of bifurcated. Like you only have two options today. You want to slum it with a bunch of house flippers in the real estate club, or if you're an accredited investor getting to larger deals as a passive investor, getting all that same tax benefits too, but you got to be in value add deals. Unfortunate.
So tell us about if people want to learn more. I love you're just so knowledgeable and I really have enjoyed talking to you. So tell them about your website, tell them about your book. They can engage with you more if they want to. You've got a lot of great advice to give. So tell us about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of your folks are just buying the single family homes, and I'd say keep doing that until you get accredited investor status. So that's kind of on the first floor of the wealth elevator. I have a lot of free resources for those guys because I used to teach people how to buy remote rental properties back then. Now it's just all on YouTube and my website.
Yeah,
But yeah,
great.
if you're an accredited investor, check out my book, The Wealth Elevator. Book a call with me, Lane at thewealthelevator.com. And if anybody buys the book and sends us the email team at thewealthelevator.com, we'll hook them up with the PDF version so they can throw it into ChatGPT, ask it whatever questions it wants.
Yeah, nice.
Or the MP3s, since if they're like me and they can't read too well and they rather have somebody just read it to them. But yeah, I think it comes down to like what you have to work with, right? Like I'm a 5'6" Asian person. Like I'm not gonna go play basketball. That's silly. Just like if somebody has, they're making $400,000 a year at their day job, they're not gonna flip houses. That's silly.
Yeah, it's
Right. So you
silly.
got to know where you're at starting out with and kind of tailor your strategy to kind of the best path forward for you. So that's what kind of the wealth elevator contract
The
is.
book. No, that's awesome. And I'll put the link in the description for everybody. Well, thanks for spending time with us today, Lane. I really appreciate it. Look forward to engaging with you more. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining.